Welcome back to Monsters Among Us. Tonight, we're going to take a closer look at a case that's as heartbreaking as it is disturbing. It's the case of Haley Anderson. Haley Anderson was a nursing student at Binghamton University, full of life, full of promise. But what began as an ordinary day would end in something no one could have imagined. Her fate was sealed not by a stranger, but by someone much closer. So, settle in. And as always, if you'd like to hear more true crime and missing persons cases, be sure to subscribe. There are many more stories waiting in the dark. Haley Anderson was born on May 9, 1995, in Westbury, New York, to her parents, Karen and Gordon. From the very beginning, Haley was known for her gentle spirit, her kind heart, and a quiet curiosity that made her stand out. She was the kind of child who loved to explore the world around her, always asking questions, always eager to learn. And it showed. Haley excelled in school, earning straight A's, with her teachers often praising not just her intelligence, but the warmth she brought into the classroom. As she got older, that same sweetness stayed with her. While many of her peers were out chasing parties and breaking rules, Haley remained grounded. She enjoyed staying home, spending time with her family, and keeping close to the people who mattered most. By all accounts, she was the kind of person who just got along with everyone, bright, kind, and full of promise. As intelligent and focused as Haley was, it came as no surprise when she announced her plans to go to college. She had always been driven, motivated not just to succeed, but to make something meaningful of her life. In 2012, she and her mother began touring schools, exploring her options. After visiting a few campuses, Haley eventually settled on Binghamton University, a respected school in upstate New York. It felt like the right fit. She chose to major in nursing, and again, no one was surprised. For someone as compassionate and nurturing as Haley, nursing seemed like a natural path. She wanted to help people, to care for others in their most vulnerable moments. And for Haley, it wasn't just a career, it was a calling. In her junior year at Binghamton, Haley took another big step toward her future. She applied to the university's prestigious Decker School of Nursing. And of course, she was accepted. She was ecstatic. By the summer of 2017, Haley landed an internship with Northwell Health, one of the largest healthcare providers in the state. She thrived there. In fact, the internship went so well that they planned to offer her a job after graduation, once she passed her board exams. To make it all happen, Haley would need to stay for a 5th year of college. But that didn't bother her at all. She was committed, focused, and genuinely excited for what the future held. At that point, everything in Haley's life seemed to be falling into place. But as we know, appearances can be deceiving. And the future isn't always what we expect. While in school, Haley met a guy named Kevin, someone she connected with almost instantly. The two clicked in that effortless way some people do. They laughed together, supported each other, and for a time their relationship seemed like something special. But as much as Haley cared for Kevin, she also had big dreams. She talked about buying a hippie van and traveling the country as a nurse, helping people while exploring the open road. That adventurous spirit, that deep desire for independence, it was a huge part of who she was. Because of that, Haley wasn't sure a serious relationship fit into her plans. So, their relationship became a bit of a roller coaster, on again, off again. There was no shortage of love or care between them. They just couldn't seem to make it work in the long run. Still, Kevin was a meaningful part of Haley's college years, and her story. Haley and Kevin had a deep respect for one another. Even as their romantic relationship faded in and out, the care between them remained. They were open about seeing other people, and for a while, that arrangement worked for them. It was during this time that Haley met another nursing student named Orlando Tercero. Orlando had been born in Florida, but raised in Nicaragua, where his family was originally from. Inspired by his father, who had been a physician, Orlando dreamed of returning to the United States and following a similar path. Nursing, for him, was a way to honor that legacy. He was eventually accepted into the Decker School of Nursing, the same program Haley was in. Though they had known of each other before, it wasn't until their senior year that they began to grow closer. In fact, Haley even introduced Orlando to Kevin. The three of them got along well and became close friends. On the surface, it all seemed simple, easy even. But sometimes, the people who seem the most ordinary can be hiding the darkest truths. Because Haley and Kevin had always been on and off, Orlando saw an opening, and he took it. He professed his feelings for Haley, made it clear he wanted something more. And Haley, she didn't mind. She was casually dating, enjoying the experience of meeting new people, and she welcomed the chance to get to know Orlando better. But let's be clear, things were never official between them. There were no labels, no boyfriend, no girlfriend, just two people spending a lot of time together, talking, laughing, hanging out. Haley liked Orlando's company, but the relationship stayed in that undefined, in-between space. Now here's where it gets complicated. Orlando had joined the same fraternity as Kevin, and when the other fraternity brothers caught wind that Orlando was seeing Haley, someone Kevin had history with, they weren't exactly thrilled. It rubbed them the wrong way. So much so that eventually, Orlando was kicked out of the fraternity altogether. Feeling hurt, rejected, and angry, Orlando turned to the one person he thought would understand, Haley. And she did, at least at first. She comforted him, offered support, listened. But then, things took a darker turn. Orlando began threatening to take his own life. It wasn't just a cry for help. It was a way to guilt Haley, to manipulate her into staying close, into feeling responsible for his pain. And Haley, being the deeply empathetic person she was, did feel bad. She always had a soft spot for people in pain, but even she couldn't ignore that something about all of this just wasn't right. After a while, things with Orlando started to feel heavy. Too heavy. Haley had enough on her plate. Nursing school was demanding, and she needed space to focus, time for herself, her studies, her future. But Orlando didn't take that well. While some people described him as the life of the party, charismatic, fun, always up for a good time, there was another side to him, a darker side, one that made people uncomfortable. He would show up uninvited, lurking around to see what Haley was doing. If she was busy, it didn't seem to matter. He just wanted to be near her, constantly, and it started to feel less like affection and more like obsession. Haley noticed it, and so did the people closest to her. Her roommate Josie, for one, had grown tired of it. She'd often tell Orlando he needed to leave, especially when Haley wasn't even home. He'd linger at the apartment like he was waiting for something, or someone. Josie suspected why. She thought he was terrified Haley might be seeing someone else. Then came the night everything boiled over. September 15th, 2017. Orlando threw a party at his house with a few of his roommates. He invited Haley and her friends. It was supposed to be a fun night, but it didn't stay that way. At the party, Orlando found out something he hadn't been prepared to hear. Haley was seeing Kevin again. He snapped. In front of everyone, he exploded, screaming at Haley, creating a scene that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. The tension was thick, the vibe completely wrecked. Then, after downing far too much alcohol, Orlando got sick. He started vomiting from the sheer amount he'd consumed. And even after all of that, after the yelling, after the public humiliation, Haley still helped him. She comforted him, got him to bed, took care of him before leaving for home. But the moment she walked out that door, he was already calling her, over and over, and when she didn't answer, Orlando lashed out again, this time in a way that crossed another line entirely. He slashed the tires on Haley's car. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was control, rage, possessiveness. and it was escalating. The next day, Kevin spent the night at Haley's place. When he stepped outside around 3 p.m., he noticed something strange. Haley's car tires had been slashed. Haley recorded a video of the damage and posted it on Snapchat, not naming anyone, just documenting the bizarre, frustrating moment. But it wasn't long before Orlando saw it and replied directly to her story, claiming that he too had his tires slashed. Something about that didn't sit right with Haley, and her instincts were sharp. When she mentioned she was planning to file a police report, Orlando tried to talk her out of it. That only made her more suspicious. Haley went through with the report, but chose not to press charges. Instead, she confronted Orlando herself. That's when he admitted it. Yes, he slashed her tires. He said he was drunk, angry, and lost control. But he agreed to pay for the damages. To Haley, that seemed like the end of it. A mistake, yes, but one he owned up to and made right, at least on the surface. If only things had been that simple. In the months that followed, it became clear that Orlando hadn't let go. He continued to follow Haley's movements, showing up where she was, watching her, keeping himself in her orbit. It wasn't love, it was obsession. And then came the night of March 7th, 2018. Haley and her roommates were having a quiet girls' night at their apartment, playing games, drinking wine, laughing. When the night wound down, each of them went off to their rooms. Everything seemed normal. But by the next morning, Haley hadn't come out of her room. At first, no one thought much of it. They'd all been drinking. Maybe she was just sleeping it off. But later that day, something felt off. Haley had made plans to attend a poetry session with one of her roommates, a plan she was excited about. And she wasn't the type to flake. Still, she didn't show up. No texts, no calls, nothing. Her friends checked the Find My Friends app. It showed Haley's phone at Orlando's house. 1 day passed, then 2. By March 9th, panic began to set in. Her friends, desperate to make sure she was okay, drove to Orlando's home. They knocked and knocked, but no answer. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. Then, a decision. They broke a window and climbed inside. What they found inside would haunt them forever. Michelle screamed. A scream that pierced through the silence, through the denial, through the hope that maybe this would all make sense. Haley was lying naked on Orlando's bed, lifeless, cold, gone. Josie immediately called 911. But by the time EMTs arrived, there was nothing they could do. Haley was already dead. As the reality of Haley's death began to sink in, investigators got to work. With a search warrant in hand, police combed through Orlando's apartment, looking for answers. Anything that could explain what happened in those final hours. That's when they found it. A handwritten note, scrawled in Spanish. In it, Orlando apologized for what he had done. He wrote that he never believed himself capable of such a thing. He called himself stupid. He said he was sorry, again and again, but there was no undoing it now. While police were processing the scene, another call came in, this time from Orlando's sister. She was worried. Her brother had sent her some alarming text messages, ones that made her fear for his safety. She reached out to local authorities and requested a wellness check. She had no idea what he'd just done. Meanwhile, over 150 miles away in Waverly, New York, officers were preparing to do something no parent should ever have to experience. They went to Karen's home, Haley's mother. They told her the news. Haley was gone. Karen's world collapsed in an instant. Just 3 days earlier, she'd spoken to her daughter on the phone, completely unaware it would be the last time she'd ever hear her voice. She couldn't wrap her head around it. How someone so full of life, so loving, could be taken so suddenly, so violently. When police told her that Orlando was the primary suspect, it shattered her even more. This wasn't some stranger. This was someone she had met. Someone who had smiled in her presence. Someone she thought was just another part of Haley's college life. Why would he hurt her? On March 10th, the autopsy results came in. The findings confirmed what investigators, and Haley's loved ones, had already feared. Haley had been murdered. The official cause of death, manual strangulation. It was now a confirmed homicide, and Orlando was gone. The next step was clear. Find him, arrest him, make sure he couldn't run from what he had done. Haley deserved justice, and her family, her friends, they needed answers. As the investigation continued, police uncovered key surveillance footage that would clarify what happened in Haley's final hours. It showed Haley and Orlando entering his apartment together in the early morning hours of March 8th. She never came back out, but Orlando did. Several hours later, he was seen leaving alone. Investigators followed his trail. What they discovered was both disturbing and infuriating. After leaving the apartment, Orlando drove straight to John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York. From there, he boarded an international flight bound for Nicaragua, his family's country of origin. And that's not all. Before fleeing the U.S., it's believed that Orlando attempted to take his own life, possibly by hanging. There were signs in the apartment suggesting a failed suicide attempt, but instead of turning himself in, he ran. Maybe he thought fleeing to Nicaragua would mean freedom. Maybe he believed he'd gotten away with murder. He was wrong. On Tuesday, March 13th, just days after Haley's body was discovered, Nicaraguan National Police located Orlando at the Hospital de Leon. Records confirmed he'd entered the country on Friday, March 9th at 3:55 p.m., less than 24 hours after killing Haley. Due to his mental and physical state, likely from the failed suicide attempt, he was being treated at a psychiatric hospital. But that didn't stop authorities from taking action. He was arrested while still at the hospital and then transferred to the Directorate of Judicial Assistance, better known as El Chipote, a notorious detention center in Managua. Back in the U.S., the Broome County District Attorney issued a warrant for Orlando's arrest, charging him with second-degree murder, a charge that carries a sentence of up to life in prison if convicted. But because Nicaragua does not extradite its own citizens under its constitution, U.S. prosecutors were forced to wait and watch. In Nicaragua, Orlando was formally charged with femicide, a specific charge used in cases where a woman is killed because of her gender. His trial began in September 2019, and the evidence was overwhelming. He was convicted and later sentenced to 30 years in prison, the maximum penalty under Nicaraguan law for femicide. In March 2020, his appeal to reduce the sentence was denied. Justice, at least partially, was served. But the story isn't over. Orlando Tercero still faces a second-degree murder charge in Broome County, New York. If and when he completes his sentence in Nicaragua, the door remains open for future extradition, should a future DA choose to pursue it. For now, Haley's family holds on to the only measure of peace available, knowing that her killer did not walk free.